Hello, my dear gardeners. Well, it's raining cats and dogs here in Connecticut for 3 days in a row. So today I am in my sunroom with you among my beautiful plants, and I'm going to answer 4 of your questions about roses. So let's begin. The first question would be, I never really thought about the fact that the rose I cut way back was actually a climber. Maybe the reason why it probably didn't bloom this year? Plus, the Japanese beetles feasted on it for months. Thanks again for the informative video. Yes, Japanese beetles are going to feast on your roses for months. If you're not going to be diligent collecting them, or you have a lot of roses in the neighborhood and Japanese beetles are just flying around between different roses. Well, but that's a totally different story. Here we have a question. Maybe the reason why it probably didn't bloom this year? Yes. Usually climbers bloom on old wood, meaning that first year the climber produces this long main canes, and that main cane might or might not bloom at the very top with one rose. And a lot of beginner rosarians get stressed out that their roses are not blooming. That's a normal situation. Only next year that main long cane will produce lateral canes, and those lateral canes will start blooming for you. But what if you don't know the situation, how climbers behave, generally, majority of them, and you cut this main cane? Well, rose has to start all over again, that process of creating a long cane and then next year creating blooms on it. And if you keep doing the same thing to your climber, keep cutting those long canes every year, you just deprive rose of creating all the blooms. And generally the growing habit of the climber becomes very messy. The side shoots are becoming to be very long, and generally the gardener doesn't know what to do with all that mess and starts shaping it in lollipop shape. And that's a disaster because the climber doesn't want to be kept as a shrub. You have to keep those long canes and let them go wherever they want. Of course, you can trim them at the point where you really don't want them to grow further, but make sure that those long canes are kept on the climbing rose, and only next year that long cane will produce lateral shoots, and lateral shoots will bloom for you. And of course, I said it many times already, but it's worth repeating. The main canes need to be trained in as parallel to the ground level as possible. This way, main canes will create a lot of lateral shoots. And lateral shoots is what we need. Those lateral shoots will create bloom for us. Because that's what we need. We want our roses to bloom, right? That's why we have them in our garden. So correct to the person who asked this question, you probably cut the main cane and robbed yourself from all those beautiful blooms. Question number 2. Thanks for the vlog, Olga. Can I ask some advice, as never sure what to do about rose leaves at the end of the season? I have 2 lovely generous gardeners with lovely foliage. Is it best to leave this season's foliage on the rose and remove in the spring when new growth appears? Thank you, and I really need to get Autumn Glory. See them? Yours are looking gorgeous. All right, Autumn Joy, by the way, see them. That was on my porch. You know what? A lot of gardeners do strip all the leaves off the roses. I don't do that. If I have a very healthy rose, which is not sick and doesn't have any leaf spots, I generally leave those very healthy leaves on the stems, and I don't intentionally take them off. You can't really even take them off in the fall. Those healthy leaves at the end of the stems, they really hold on to the stem really well, and I feel that even if I take them off forcefully, I somewhat damage the cane. So whatever falls from the rose and whatever looks sick, I collect and I strip off and I throw it in the garbage. No way I let it fly around the garden, and next year all those spores are going to fly with the wind on my roses. So I don't strip everything from the rose. I only take away everything which looks sick. So that my advice would be. And the new growth, which appears at the end in the fall, it is usually very healthy on the rose, so I let it be. And I let that foliage stay for the winter, and only in spring I take all the leaves out with trimming and cutting stems away, and just generally cleaning up all the rows. So that would be my response. Question number 3. I moved into a house in the spring 6 years ago and didn't realize how many roses were on the property because previous owners cut down to hide them. I have them growing up and out of huge hydrangea shrubs, which makes me believe that they were planted too close originally. I also have them coming up on walkway by front door, and this past summer cut them way back and left 2 leaders. The canes look like yours but have burgundy white center with yellow ring around them. The neighbor showed me a picture of our backyard from 9 years ago from a barbecue party, and there was a huge, beautiful octagon pergola with roses growing beautifully on 5 sides. They didn't want to replace the pergola since they were moving, so they removed it and cut most of the roses down. But they've been popping up everywhere, so I think there was trellises throughout at one time. I feel at a loss what to do. Well, my advice would be, the first decision, the lady who asked would be, do you want to keep those roses or you don't want to keep those roses? Because looks like those roses are climbing roses, since the original owners had the pergola there. So let's go the way that you want to keep those roses. You have to build a support for them. And right now, because all those roses were cut to the ground, they have to build up that canopy all over again. Yes, the root system is mature, so the build-up will happen much faster than with a new rose, let's say, with a young baby rose. But still, it will take some time to create those long canes one after another. So you have to build a support, a very strong support. At the beginning, it will be much bigger and stronger in comparison to baby roses growing near those support systems you're going to create. But know that those are mature root systems, and they're going to mature fairly well and will create climbing display for you. I would go for it. I would keep all those roses. Make sure I don't cut them to the ground again. Make sure I will keep all those lone canes, train them in the horizontal position as much as possible around whatever support you create around them. Try to find out what roses they are. And I know it can be tricky. You can ask around on Facebook and people usually respond what rose that is. And by knowing the name of the rose, you will know how big that rose is. Because some climbing roses are very short, 5-6 feet. Some climbing roses can eat the house, so it's good to know the name of the rose. And then just enjoy those roses. Of course, you can cut them down and dig them up if they are popping out somewhere in the place you don't want them. But again, those are mature root systems. And it takes time for the baby rose to develop in the garden. And you have already those old roses. And I think it would be exciting to try to find out what roses you have. It's like a hunting game, you know. And let them thrive and let them make your garden beautiful. So that's my answer to this question. One more question is, I have it on the paper here, is, thank you for this video. What happens if you instead cut the cane back to the ground? Is it ever a good option or should it be avoided? Well, it kind of echoes the other question here where the previous owners cut all the roses down. What happens to the rose, the climbing rose, if you cut all the stems way down to the ground? The rose will probably live. It depends on the climate where you live. So if you live in a warmer climate, when weather in winter is not severe and really punishing to the plants, your rose will just overwinter the root system and there would be enough of growth on top excuse me, for the rose to start producing long canes that year. And of course that year the rose will not bloom. It will only get busy producing long main stems. There is one but here. If your rose is grafted, that graft union is the weakest point in the rose. That's why the life expectancy of grafted roses is much less than roses on own roots. So if your rose is grafted and you cut it all the way to the back, that graft union might suffer. And let's say you had very severe winter, everything on the top died down, or you cut it, and then we have only the root system to deal with. And root system in grafted rose is different. It's a different rootstock. In our area here, Connecticut, and it's Dr. Huey. So what happens? The root system is different. It starts producing different plant, different rose. It starts living its own life, and suddenly, if you live in Connecticut, it's Dr. Hue, it's a bright red rose. And sometimes people say, oh, something happened through the winter and my rose became red. No, what happened is the rootstock took over, or is trying to take over, because usually the rootstock is much stronger and healthier than the rose on top of it, which was grafted to the rootstock. I hope I'm not making it too confusing. So what happens if you cut the canes all the way to the ground? It is more difficult. The situation can be disastrous if you have a grafted rose, because of all that difference between rootstock and the rose on top. But if you have own root rose which is growing on its own roots, the situation has more hope in it. A rose will just produce new canes, the root system overwinters well, and rose will start growing again. And you will have to be patient, because the climber has to produce long canes and has to build up that body before it starts blooming well for you. So your rose will not die. The reason why would you do that can be several. There are cases in the garden where you have to cut a rose very close to the ground. First case would be if you live in a cold climate and there is severe winter damage from the winter, from the frost, and a lot of canes die back. You can't leave those black canes through the spring and summer because they're dead. They're not going to produce anything. And during spring trimming, you have to trim them way down to the young wood, meaning to a live wood, to green tissue. And that usually, if rose is very much damaged, that usually is all the way down to almost to the crown, to the ground level. Another reason why you would trim drastically your rose would be if canes have cane borers in them. And what happens to the cane borer? It goes all the way down, it eats away all the way down to the end of the rose, and it can be disastrous. It can be the death of the rose. Never happened to me. I had several cases of cane borers. I cut them quickly. I trimmed my cane all the way to the ground. But usually the cane borers infest only 1 or 2 canes in the rose, and it's not a biggie if you cut those canes out. Other canes take over. But that would be the case if that you need to trim that cane beyond the damage, to catch that pest in the cane, for it not to continue its destructive way down the cane. So you cut it underneath the damage, and very often we see the damage, we see this wilted cane when the damage is severe, and usually it is very low down to the surface of the rose. We need to do that cut. But otherwise, I don't really see a very serious reason why people would trim roses really low, the climbers. Of course, we have hybrid teas, which are generally trimmed very short to produce those long stems with a rose on top, a big rose on top. That's probably why hybrid teas are bred for. Climbers, big no-no. If you don't need to trim the stems all the way to the ground, please don't do it. Let your climbers live. So that's it today. My apologies, by the way, for not answering and not staying on top of all the messages under the videos. I am at my last run with Master Gardening program. We are going to have a party actually next month. I will be given a badge. I will keep you posted, but there's a lot of stuff was going on. Plus my sister from Ukraine came to visit, so we are a little bit busy here. Please be patient with me. So that's it. 4 questions answered. I hope you are enjoying your gardens, and I will see you in my next video. Happy gardening!